Nice to see everybody, and a Chag Sameach, Chag Chanuka Sameach. I'd like to mention tonight's sponsors. We have three main sponsors for tonight's event. In no specific order, okay? We have Mayor and Stephanie Friedman, who are with us this evening, who would like to dedicate tonight's learning in honor of my birthday, okay, being that it's my birthday tonight, so thank you very much. And thank you. Many other birthdays also. December birthdays of two of their grandchildren, to mention a few, special month of Kislev. Also, the two Mayor and Stephanie are celebrating their 20th anniversary, so it should be a big mazal tov. That's beautiful, and only simcha and happiness and light and all great things. Pray for their children, their grandchildren, amen v'amen. So thank you very much for sponsoring tonight's Zera Shimshon class. We'd also like to thank David and Ingrid Edery, who are also sponsoring tonight's class for the Refuah Shlema of Moshe ben Margalit and Meir ben Mazal. Meir ben Mazal is someone local. I'm not going to mention his name, but he just had a kidney transplant. Someone just donated one to him, and on Monday was here in Florida was the procedure, and thank God everything is going well, and hopefully they have a Refuah Shlema, both the donor and the recipient. May they have a Refuah Shlema, amen v'amen. Last but not least, we'd like to thank Rabbi Howie Seif and his wife Dina, who are also co-sponsoring tonight's evening. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you the Montreal connection that's here. Thank you all the locals and our family and friends that are here. And Bizrat Hashem, we're going to have a great evening understanding the Parsha, understanding Chanuka, and also understanding the inevitable, being that tonight is Christmas. Actually happens to be my English birthday and Hebrew birthday are both coinciding now. My English birthday is the 25th of December, and my Hebrew birthday is the 4th night of Chanuka, which we just lit. So I guess a very auspicious... right. Not yet. Twice as young. Thank you. Okay. So let's just get a recap of our main character in this week's Torah portion, and that is Joseph. Joseph finds himself being hated by his very own brothers. A lot of jealousy, a lot of animosity, and his brothers kidnap him and sell him. It's a very horrible, very sad thing that anyone would ever imagine. Your own sibling kidnapping you and selling you as a slave. This is what happened to Joseph. He was all of 17 years old at this time. Very young, teenage years. Obviously wasn't an easy thing for him. But what Joseph was great at doing was rising above all of his struggles and succeeding with them. As soon as he came to Potiphar's house, he was already seen as a very talented individual, as a noble and respectful, honorable young man, and he started climbing the ranks. He literally went from janitorial services to something greater and greater and greater and greater until he was in charge of Potiphar's estate. Potiphar was the number 2 man to Paro, and he was a very wealthy man, successful man, special person in the hierarchy of Egypt at that time. But unfortunately, as we learned in last week's Torah portion, Potiphar's wife set her eyes on Joseph and was causing a tremendous temptation to Joseph until there was a day, which is ironic, it's similar to today. The Torah says, and it was a day. What day was it? It was actually their holiday. It was a day that all of the Egyptian people would go to, you want to call it their mosques, their churches, their town hall, to celebrate their holiday. Right? Similar to a day like today, which we'll get to a little later. And she specifically didn't go because she knew that the Jew boy doesn't celebrate this holiday. Hopefully things haven't changed, right? That the Jew doesn't celebrate this holiday, and he's not going to be there. That's going to be my time to corner him, and finally he won't be able to bear my temptation anymore. That was in her mind. That's what she was planning to do. We know the story. that she tried to get him, he escaped, left his jacket behind, and that caused him a bunch of trouble, which got him thrown into jail. So Joseph is now 18 years old, and he's had a roller coaster over the past, let's give it, past year and a half, between being his father's favorite, being kidnapped, sold as a slave, sold 4 times over, finds his way in Potiphar's house, finally sees the light at this tunnel, and then boom, he's sent to jail. He was sent to jail, and the way God intended it to be was for 10 years. 10 years is a long time. Seems enough time for someone to learn their lesson, even though he overcame his temptation, but it was still something that he had to do. If we make a calculation, Joseph stands in front of Pharaoh at 30 years old. There's 2 years that went somewhere. Where did those 2 years go? Right? 18 plus 10 is 28. But the Torah tells us Joseph is 30 when he stands up. The beginning of this week's Torah portion tells us, Vayhi, this is the beginning of chapter 41. Vayhi Miketz shenatayim yamim. And now 2 years have passed. 2 years from when? So 2 years from when Joseph's sentence, so to say, according to God, was supposed to be over. And why did he have another 2 years? So let's go back to the end of last week's Torah portion. It's in chapter 40, verse 14. So Joseph tells one of these interesting fellows, and we'll get into specifically who these fellows were, and a lot of different interesting dreams that were taking place. But there was a certain fellow in the jail that was set free, and Joseph tells him as follows, Ki im zechartani itecha, please remember me when you go out. To who? Kasher yitavlach, when it's going to be all good for you. V'asitana imadi chesed, and please do an act of loving kindness. Reciprocate to me. V'hizkartani el paro, v'hotzetani min habayit hazeh, and remind me, mention me to Paro to get me out of this jail. There's 2 interpretations to why Joseph was sentenced an extra 2 years over the 10. One could be the verbiage that is used in this verse that he says, Zechartani, to mention me to Paro. He said it twice. If you're such a Baal Emunah, if you have such faith and trust in God, what are you relying on this other inmate to mention you to Paro to free you? So this is one interpretation, since though he mentioned twice to this inmate to remind him, to mention him to Paro. Another interpretation is that Joseph was literally waiting 2 days, because according to the interpretation of the dream, as we're going to explain, the 3rd day is when the inmate was going to see if the interpretation of the dream was true or not. So he was waiting 2 full days to see if he's going to mention him to Paro or not. So since he put his trust in those 2 days, he was then punished for 2 subsequent years not to be set free. So to make a long story short, Joseph is in jail for a total of 12 years opposed to 10. What was Joseph so popular for? Because even when he gets to Potiphar's house, he becomes popular, he starts rising the ranks. So too, when he gets into jail, he becomes popular and he starts rising the ranks also. How did he start getting popular in jail? What triggered him to become the manager of all the inmates in jail when he was taken there? So, as we know, these parashas are the parashas of the dreams, the Torah portions of dreams. Does anyone know how many dreams between last week's Torah portion and this week's Torah portion there were? And don't guess right away. Take a moment to think about it. Michael, lower the AC. Michael, can we lower the AC a little? Thanks. Anyone, how many dreams? How many dreams in last week's Torah portion and this week two together? Guess number 1, or educated guess number 1.
Initially it was 1 dream.
Not 4.
67.
No. It's all under 10. It's definitely under 10. Let's go. Where's our scholars? Art's our scholar. 9, you're very close.
7. 8.
Okay, are we just guessing, or are we taking some real guesses? Okay, let's do this. How many dreamers are there? How many dreams are recounted between people? How many people are dreaming? We know Joseph is a dreamer. 4 people are dreaming, right?
Yes.
Okay, Joseph has 2 dreams. We'll go through them quickly. Next is the butler and the baker. Okay, well, the steward. We'll put the steward. The steward and the baker. And there you go, the one. And then Paro himself. So that's 4 dreamers. How many dreams did each person dream? 2. Where did we get 2 dreams? Let's go through the dreams. Okay, Joseph dreams 2. He shares his dreams with his siblings and even his father, to which he was reprimanded on. Okay, yeah, 8 was the right number. Okay, first dream, Joseph has a dream of stalks. He's in the middle, and then there are stalks representing his brothers all around, bowing towards him. Next dream he has is with the stars, the sun, and the moon, where he is being bowed to, again surrounded by all of them. That's 2 dreams for Joseph. Next time comes the steward. He's the individual who used to serve wine to Paro. He has a very interesting dream. His dream is of of him on top of, like standing over Paro and squeezing these 3 vines of grapes, of like clusters of 3 clusters on one vine into Paro's very own glass, okay, cup. Then we have the baker. The baker has a very interesting dream of him with 3 baskets full of baked goods on top of his head and birds coming and eating them out of there. So how many dreams is that totally? 4. 2 for Joseph, 1 for the steward, 1 for the baker. Okay? Paro has 2 dreams. Does everyone know Paro's dreams? Yeah. Yes. The first one being of the cows. He's had 7 beautiful, lavish cows which emerge from the Nile River, and then follow them 7 rigid, malnourished, disgusting, scary cows which devour the fat cows and don't show any difference. They didn't put any pounds. Right? By a show of hands, who would love to devour a complete meal, okay, and not put on any pounds? Come on, everyone, you can put your hands up. You could do it, okay? So this is what really troubled Paro. Besides for the whole, 7 fat cows, 7 rigid cows, malnourished cows, but they didn't even show any difference. Okay, his last dream, okay, this is the 6th we're mentioning so far, is that of a stalk of kernels, 7 specifically, which were coming out of one grain, which were then devoured by another similar type of stalk that obviously was a deplorated, disgusting, a scary one. Okay, this is 6 dreams so far. I skipped 2 on purpose because at the end of last week's Torah portion, we see that both the steward and the baker both interpreted the dream of the other one. So when the steward had his dream of the 3 clusters of grapes that he's squeezing into Paro's cup, he also dreamt that in 3 days from now, his friend, the baker, is going to be taken out and killed. And the baker dreamt that in 3 days, his friend, the steward, is going to be taken out and put right back in his position where he was previously. So that's why I say each of them had 2 dreams. That's what prompted the baker to share his dream with Joseph for interpretation, because he saw that they each shared their dream, that he shared his dream, the first one, the steward shared his dream, and then he interpreted based on the dream that he had. He's like, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about, and it's a positive interpretation. Great. He gave his dream, and then he got a negative interpretation, which what got him very, very angry and not happy about it. Okay, so this is the Parsha of the dreams. Joseph is known for interpreting dreams. He did so in jail, and then finally one day, 2 years too late, the steward remembers about this interpretation. Paro is trying to get all of his advisors, all of his wise men, to help him with his dreams. He's losing sleep over the fact that he has these 2 dreams. He doesn't take it lightly that the leader of the greatest empire of the known civilization back in the day is having these dreams. It's not by chance. He really considered it to be prophecy. As we know, it becomes prophecy. It is prophecy. But everyone's coming giving him interpretations, and he's not happy. Finally, the steward says, I'm going to bring him someone who can help him. Hashem made him on purpose forget. And then Hashem opened his mind and he allowed the steward to remember this Jewish boy, Joseph. They take him out and they present him in front of Paro and he gives interpretation. With that introduction, we're going to delve into a beautiful chidush, Torah novelty that the Zera Shimshon shares on this week's Parsha. If anyone is following, it's on chapter 41, verses 7 and 8. And I'll read. So, the 7 stalks, the 7 ears of grain which are sprouting from one single stalk, okay, come out, vativlana ashibolima dakot, and then they devour the ugly, thin, unhealthy ears of grain, devour the 7 healthy ones, nice ones. Vaikatz paro vehine chalom, and vaikatz literally means Paro jumps up and startled, and there's one dream. Vayiva boker, the next verse says, and then it happens to be in the morning. Vatipaim rucho, and then he was becoming very, very agitated. Paro's soul, Paro's morale was very agitated and down. Vaishlach vaikrat kol chartumei Mitzrayim, and he calls on all the wise men of Egypt to come and try to give him an interpretation. The Zera Shimshon asks on this verse 3 questions. I'm not expecting you to remember these questions, but all these questions are just coming to present to us that there may be a great problem with this verse, and the answer to it teaches us something very, very interesting about dreams, which we're going to learn about tonight as well. We're trying to get everything in one night. We're trying to get dreams, Chanuka, the Torah portion, Christmas. We're going to get it. We're going to get it all. Okay? I'm pacing myself. Okay. The first is he wants to know why Paro is disturbed in the morning. If you have a bad dream and you wake up startled from it, are you disturbed now or are you disturbed in the morning? Well, you may be both, but the Torah only tells us that Paro is disturbed and he's agitated from his dream only in the morning. That's his first question. Second question is, why does the Torah tell us that he wakes up and he is startled? Why is there any necessity to that? Meaning, if the first dream, because this was the second dream, if the first dream the Torah tells us he woke up, okay, so that means it's 2 separate dreams. After the dream of the cows, he wakes up startled, he goes back to sleep. Why does the Torah tell us he wakes up again and he is startled? Well, there you go, that's part of the answer. Very good. Okay. The third question is he wants to know why only after this sequence of the 2 dreams does the Torah say, Vehine chalom, and behold, it's a dream. Okay? Many of us already know the answer, maybe think we know the answer, but listen to the way the Zera Shimshon presents it. It's fascinating. The Talmud tells us that there are 3 different signs you can look to in your dream to know if the dream has any meaning or not. Okay? If it's not one of these 3 signs, not all 3, if it's not one of these 3 signs, the dream is regardless. Not important at all. The first is, it has to be a dream that repeats. If the dream is not repeating, it is, as we're soon going to explain, nothing important at all. Next is, it has to be a dream that you dreamt in the morning, meaning not during the day, but like right before waking up. Okay? Normally, by the way, scientifically, our brains are always on and thinking, and we dream multiple dreams a night, but most are not remembered. Most are just forgotten, and sometimes, this happened to all of us, including myself, you dream something, you think you remember it, and you wake up and you try to either put it on paper or tell someone, and it's not there anymore, right? This happens. Okay, so the first is that it has to be repeating. If it repeats, that's one category of a true dream. Or if it was dreamt in the morning, or if you dream it about someone else. Something you dream about someone else normally is something that fortunately and unfortunately is something which may come true. It may be a glimpse of prophecy according to the Talmud. We'll speak practically in a moment. So look at Paro. Paro now, he knows this. If any of us think that Paro was a dumb man, think again. Paro was a genius. He was one of the smartest people that was living back in his time, and probably smarter than anyone we've ever met, okay? And that we will ever meet. He was true intellect, very, very smart. He was only shy of Joseph in one language. Joseph knew 71 languages because he knew Hebrew, and Paro knew 70 languages. He was a scholar except for Hebrew. He did not know Hebrew, and this was a little pact, a little deal the two of them had between themselves not to throw Paro under the bus, because popular to or contrary to popular belief, the way the position of ruler was determined was based on how wise a person was. So Paro's like, listen, I'll take you out of jail, I'll name you Mr. Number 2, you'll be the viceroy, however, don't give away the secret that you're really wiser than me, so this way I could stay Paro. And that was a deal that the two of them made, interestingly enough. Okay, so look at Paro. Paro wakes up in a startle, not only after the first dream, which was scary, but specifically again after the second dream. Why? Because it's a repeating dream. It's the same dream. 7 ears of grain from the same stalk, 7 cows, ugly or disgusting ones devouring, same dream. He's like, okay, that's one of the 3 signs, even though we don't need 3 signs. But then he, in the morning, realizes, oh, that last dream was right before the morning. That's when Vatipaim Rukho, that's when he becomes agitated. But then he's bothered. I know that we only need 1 of these signs, but I got 2 already. He was searching for the 3rd, the Zera Shimshon says. And what was the issue? The issue was all of his wise men were coming to him and saying, you're going to have 7 daughters. And they're all going to die. That's the 7 fat cows, and then then they're going to be devoured. Okay, you're going to conquer 7 new countries, 7 new lands. They're going to come and they're going to be gone. And Paro was not settled with those answers because they're about himself. And he, according to the Zera Shimshon, was looking for an interpretation that's about other people. As soon as Joseph comes out, and we're not going to speak about this now, but this is just to throw in the greatness of Joseph. The first word he says to Paro, Paro tells him, oh, I hear you know how to interpret dreams. You know what he says? It's all from God. What are you saying that for? He doesn't believe in God. He thinks he's a God. But to show how steadfast Joseph was in his belief and his trust in God, he learned his mistake of trying to put his trust in the steward. He had those extra 2 years to think about that. He says it's all from God. God's the one who interprets it. And right away he says his interpretation. 7 plenty years, 7 years of famine. Not even a blink later, Paro's like, that's it. How did Paro know that? Because he was the first person to give an interpretation of Paro's dreams that were not about him, they were about someone else. And so in an interesting way, the Zera Shimshon explains how Paro was looking for all 3 of these conditions, even though only 1 means that there may be some value to the dream. But he's like, why am I being shown 2 of these conditions? He was seeking for the 3rd, and then we know the rest of the story, that it was true. They right away hastened those 7 next years for plenty. As soon as those 7 years were done, 2 years passed, and it was all, meaning it turned into, so again, 7 years of plenty, then it right away went into famine. 2 years into the famine is when Jacob and his family were brought down to Egypt, and then the famine was postponed. God was very merciful, and he didn't let it go 7 and 7, it was just 7 and 2. Okay, having said that, a lot of us have a lot of questions with dreams. It's a valid topic to speak about, because like I said, we all dream. The question is do we remember our dreams or not? So listen to a couple of facts of dreams that our sages tell us. Firstly, the Talmud. The Talmud says that there's no dream that does not have irrelevant information. Okay? Any dream that a person that's, by the way, the difference between a dream and prophecy. Okay? A dream always will have some irrelevant information, and a prophecy is very clear. Okay? Besides for Moses, all prophecy was done when a person was sedated. They were sleeping. But it was imagine a very, very clear dream. That's prophecy. Dreams that we have always have some irrelevance to it. That's number 1. Next is that, who says this? The Chizkuni writes that there were hundreds and thousands of dreams that took place that were dreamt by our biblical characters, but they were not recorded, right? I just mentioned only 8 dreams that took place. Where did all the other dreams go? Well, only the dreams that had some significance were brought to us in the Torah by God and by Moses. That's something else. So, how are we supposed to look at our dreams? When we have a dream, are we supposed to take them to heart? Are we supposed to care about them? Are we supposed to disregard them? So there's 3 different categories of dreams according to our rabbinic sages. Number 1 is a dream which is caused by external stimuli. For example, you're sleeping and there's a siren that rings. Could be a police siren, could be a fire siren, and you're dreaming something related to that when that's happening. That dream was completely caused by external stimuli, and it means absolutely nothing. Another example could be if a person's sleeping and there's a fan in the room, and the fan is causing some type of noise, and then you're dreaming about whether it's a car or a fan or something windy that is being caused subconsciously from something else that's happening in the room or in your surrounding. So that is something to first pay attention to. Next is, the Talmud also tells us that anything a person thinks about during the day is very likely that they will think about it in their sleep and dream about it. Okay? So for the most people, if a person dreams that they win something or they go somewhere, if it's something you thought about within the past reasonable amount of time, which there's not a specific quantity we could put on that, a day, a week, a month, what is it, right? A person dreams they won the lottery. Does that mean you got to go out and buy a lottery ticket? So according to the Talmud, so why not? It's only $1, it's only $2, it's only $5. According to the Talmud, if it's something you thought about, and again, we don't know in how long before, then it's something that is, again, regardless. It's something that has no significance to it, because the way our brains work is we think and we see during the day, and that's what's registered, and we rethink and re-see even in our sleep. The third type of dream, which is very, very few ever have this, maybe even once in life, most don't even have this, and they are glimpses of prophecy with some irrelevant matter to the very dream. Okay? These dreams, again, we don't know, right? So you're going to cross off, okay, it's not external stimuli, it's not something I thought about. Now you're dreaming and you're saying, okay, this is quasi-prophecy. How do you know what is? How do you know what isn't? So to end off this topic of the dreams, the Talmud says specifically, just as we see by Joseph, that based on the interpretation of the dream is what comes true if there is any relevance to that dream. And therefore, we should only tell our dreams. This is practical to people that love us. Because it could be that God is showing you a glimpse of prophecy. But based on how the person who you say it to interprets it, will decide on how that plays out. If we see exactly the way Joseph said it and interpreted it, it was. Well, we know that was given to him by God. So too, when we have a dream, whether it's a good dream or a bad dream, sometimes we feel like we need to share it. If you do, make sure you choose someone which is a positive person and a person who likes you, because what they say can cause it to be true. Very few people know if it can or cannot, but something for ourselves, because most of us like to share our dreams as a coping mechanism, out of security. You want to share what you were given to in your dream. And therefore, make sure you share it with someone that loves you, someone that cares about you, someone that will either not give an interpretation or say something positive. As a last note, some things that we can practically do when we do have a dream that we may not be so excited about is the following. There is a concept of doing a ta'anit chalom. Ta'anit chalom means fasting for having a scary or a disturbing dream. This is something one can do. So you wake up in the morning and you had a horrible dream the night before, you can go that day without eating. Again, if it's not something that was caused, if God forbid you have a parent or a grandparent who's passed away and you were thinking about them all day and then you dream about them that night, or you dream about someone else passing that night, that doesn't really have any relevance to it because something of that sort was already imprinted in your mind. If you went to a funeral that day and you dream about someone passing, again, don't take those messages literally because you did think about those concepts that day. Don't let it really, don't let yourself think that that's really something that could happen or is true. So that's fasting. Another is going in front of 3 friends and it's called hatavat chalom, going in front of 3 friends, saying chalom tov, chalom shalom, saying that 3 times over, saying the dream and telling them beforehand, just say something positive afterwards, regardless what it is. That's something that also can settle a person from having a bad dream. Last is, there's a special prayer in some sidurim, some prayer books, to be said during the Birkat Kohanim, when the Kohanim make the priestly blessing. In the Sephardic synagogues it's every day, in other synagogues it's only on Shabbat, and in most Ashkenaz synagogues it's only on the holidays. So there's a special prayer to read during that time. That's also something that could help us with our dreams. But again, 99.9% of the dreams that we dream are all to be disregarded, and we should not pay too much attention to them because, again, for the reasons that we said. That's the dreams, that's the Parsha. Now let's go into Chanuka. It happens to be that every single year, Chanuka, the Shabbat of Chanuka, always falls out on this week's Torah portion, Miketz. What is the correlation? Why specifically this Parsha? We know that, say, other holidays, sometimes they fluctuate. Every single year, Shabbat Chanuka is Miketz. By the way, this Shabbat Chanuka is very special and quite rare. It's the second time, very good, it's the second opportunity in the year that it's possible to take out and read from 3 Sefer Torahs at once, meaning in one service. Most of the time it's 1 Sefer Torah, sometimes there's 2 Torahs, very rarely there's 3, besides for Simchat Torah, when we finish the last part of the Torah, we start the new, and then there's the Maftir, which happens every year. Chanukah rarely happens, not rarely, it's not so often that it happens on Rosh Chodesh to be on Shabbat, and therefore 3 Sefer Torahs are going to be pulled out this Shabbat. Coming to the synagogue on this Shabbat and being there specifically on the opening of the Ark when the Torahs are taken out is a very strong sigula, strong moment to pray for anything a person needs, good health, family, friends, shiduchim, matches for those that need, parnasa, all the good things. So it's a very, if you want to take one of the weeks to go out to Shabbat, this is a good week to go visit your local synagogue for Shabbat services, being that it's Chanukah and Rosh Chodesh and the Torah portion, all 3 are going to be read. So the Zera Shimshon makes a connection between Chanukah and this week's Torah portion. He says that Joseph and Chanukah are deeply rooted and connected together. He first proves so through a gematria, a numerical value between the 2, which to many may just be cute, but then he takes it to the next level and he shows how really they are ingrained in one another. He says that in the time, he quotes this from a sefer called Megale Amukot, which is also another Kabbalistic work, that says that in the time of the Greeks, the Yevanim, the sin of the brothers of Joseph selling him was reawakened. And then he goes on to prove that. He says that the numerical value of Antiochus, which was the leader of the Greeks, is 156, which happens to be the same numerical value as if you would say Melech Yavan, the Greek king, is also 156, is the same numerical value as Joseph, all being 156. So he says already in the grammatical value of the letters, there is a correlation between Antiochus, which is the Melech Yavan, the king of Greek, the Greek king at that time, to the name, the numerical value of Joseph, and what is the connection. So he says as follows. When the Jewish people, this is quite deep, when the Jewish people returned after the destruction of the Second Temple, we know that in between those 7 years is when the story of Purim takes place. That's Mordechai and Esther. After that, they came back to rebuild the Second Temple. But they came back And as we know, the second temple was not in its greatest glory as the first temple was. When they came back to rebuild the temple, they still came bearing some unnecessary hatred between themselves, the Jews themselves. And this hatred was growing. We know the second temple stood for a total of 420 years. God was trying to send signs to the Jewish people that they have to ameliorate the love and companionship between them. He's not even talking about them to the other nations, them amongst themselves. There was unfortunate splits and disagreements, disputes, until the year 213 since the building of the second temple. So 213 years after the second temple was rebuilt was when the Greek forces grew in their strength and their power and started oppressing the Jews and made their classic decree on the Jews not learning Torah and not fulfilling three very sacred of our commandments, not counting the Rosh Chodesh, not circumcising our boys, and not keeping the Shabbat. This happened specifically in the year 213, years after the building of the second temple. The Zera Shimshon says it's not by chance. How do you say fight in Hebrew? Anybody? Riv. Riv is a fight. Riv's numerical value is 212. So the Zera Shimshon says God was warning the Jewish people after building the second temple to stop this dispute, to stop the hatred between themselves, similar to the way that Joseph's brothers had between themselves and towards Joseph. He said, put an end to this fighting, put an end to this riv, because if not, the following year, Hashem is going to bring upon some very, very strong awakening, and that was the Greek people coming and setting their decrees and conquering the Jewish people, chasing them out of the temple and having them to have to come back. So that is, according to the Zera Shimshon, the connection. He says that also these three decrees that the Greeks decreed against the Jews of, again, Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, and Brit Milah are all rooted into Joseph. Let's see how. So Joseph was sent into exile. First, he went to Egypt. When he was in Egypt, the Zera Shimshon says, not the Zera Shimshon, the Zera Shimshon quotes the Zohar that says that it was because the Jewish people, or whenever the Jewish people don't keep the Sabbath, that sends them out into exile. He says that the Jews were not diligent enough when they were in Egypt, and that's why their exile degenerated to becoming full of oppression and burden and sorrow and sadness through and under the hands of the Egyptians. It was Joseph who was fighting for it. He couldn't really outbattle them. And the Zera Shimshon explains that if you look at when the Jewish people leave Egypt, when they are finally freed with God and Moses, one of the very first commandments given to the Jewish people is the commandment of Shabbat. In order, well, obviously Brit Milah also, but in order that they start keeping the Shabbat so they don't go back into exile. So that's how he proves Shabbat connected to Joseph. Next, Rosh Chodesh. On Rosh Chodesh, there is a goat offering that is brought in the temple or in the tabernacle back in its time. Nowadays, we read from that Torah portion. That is in commemoration and to make up for the goat that Joseph's brothers slaughtered and dipped his cloak into its blood. That's Joseph's connection to Rosh Chodesh. Joseph's connection to Brit Milah is twofold. Number one, Brit Milah stands for purity, holiness, making moral and the right decisions. And Joseph made those. He was tempted and he overcame it. And also Joseph circumcised all the Egyptian men when he became viceroy. Can you believe it? Anybody who came during the years of famine and said, we want food, sure, it's going to cost you money and it's going to cost you some skin and some blood. Literally. And by doing that, we ask, why would he do that? They're not Jewish. They don't need to do that. Joseph was preparing the moral standards in Egypt before his family would come, that it wouldn't be as bad as it could be. And therefore, not only did he guard his own Brit Milah, he imposed, I'm using that word, he imposed that moral standard on the Egyptian people, at least in a one-time physical way. From there, they were on their own. And that's how he was connected to Brit Milah. So this is the way the Zera Shimshon puts the connection between Joseph and Chanuka. Okay, with 15 minutes left, I want to share a great discovery, sadness, confusion, all at once that many people have in the world that we live in today. And I'm saying this Jews and Gentiles alike. And that is the observance of the holiday of Christmas. This is a very, very touchy topic because some Jews and even non-Jews grew up observing Christmas. I mean, for me, it's a very touchy topic because my birthday was always on Christmas, and it, Zat Hashem, always will be. So, do you believe in Christmas gifts? Do you not? Well, I'm thinking in my back of my head, well, it's my birthday. I got to make sure that I get one at the same time. But let's really get to the bottom of what's being observed. And if anyone wants to or decides to observe the holiday, I think the least we can do is understand what we are celebrating. Right? Shavuot, we know what we're celebrating. Passover, we know what we're celebrating. We know what we're celebrating on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur, Sukkot. All of the Jewish holidays, Chanuka, we know what we're celebrating. We know what we celebrate and what we do. Now, even though we don't know every little detail why we do it, that's why there's the concept of Naaseh v'nishma. First you listen, and then you do. First you do, and then you understand and you listen. However, for the most part, whatever we celebrate, at least celebrate, we know why we're celebrating. So if anyone is going to celebrate Christmas, I think the bare minimum requirement is to understand what you are celebrating, and based on those conclusions, decide if you want to celebrate it or not. I'm not coming out and saying you're allowed to or you're not allowed to. I think we all need to be the judges for ourselves in this matter. Okay, so popular myth has it that Jesus was born on the 25th day of December, today. That's popular myth. I know it's not true, but wait. Popular myth has it, the word out in the street. You ask most people, when's Jesus' birthday? Or anytime anyone asks me, when's your birthday? I tell them the date. Oh, you're a Jesus baby. You're a Christmas baby. Okay? Ironic for a rabbi to be... Okay. But popular myth has it that Jesus was born the 25th of December, 1 AD, or 1 CE, whichever way you want to count the common era. Very good. Well, Jesus was definitely born as a Jew. He was Jewish. He was a Jewish scholar. Now, next. The reality is, what?
He was in the Gemara too.
Yes, he is mentioned in the Gemara. Yeshu is his Hebrew name. There are censors in the Talmud removing different interactions and teachings from Jesus in our Talmud. It's a big question of who removed that. Was it Jewish scholars or Christian scholars who were able to amend that in our own Talmud? The later is the more accepted opinion, believe it or not. Okay, so a lot of details, so pardon me if I'm peeking down at my notes while I'm saying this, but I think it's very, very important we know this, again, to get in the holiday spirit and to make sure we observe this holiday the great, great way. All right. So that's popular myth. You want to hear the reality? The reality is that the New Testament does not mention anything of the birth of Jesus. Not the day, not the year, nothing at all. Okay? The earliest gospel that writes of them was Mark, okay? And that was written in around 65 CE. And when he presents and he speaks to us about Jesus, he presents to us an adult Jesus. So the New Testament, the authentic literature that they learn, does not speak about Jesus' birth at all. Okay? The conclusion we can draw from that his birth is not mentioned in any of their main writings is that it didn't matter to them. They didn't care when he was born or not. Originally, early Christianity did not care at all about the birth of Jesus, his day at all. Okay. So why do people, or where did people get the idea that he was born on the 25th, or that he was born in 1 CE? Is that true? Is it not true? So let's first let's understand the day, and then we'll understand the year. First let's do the year and then the day. So the reason why many think that he was born in 1 CE is because there was a simple mathematical error by a Scythian monk. His name was Dionysius Exes, and he lived between 470 CE to 544. Okay, so this fellow Dionysius Exes was off by 4 years in his mathematical calculation. I'm going to quote to you, there's an individual named Cardinal Fitzmyer. So Fitzmyer wrote a biblical commentary on the Jerome Bible. He is the most influential Christian English speaker, and he writes, and I'm quoting this for you as follows. Though the year of Jesus' birth is not reckoned with certainty, the birth definitely did not occur in AD 1. The Christian year is supposed to have its starting point at the day of Jesus' birth, is based on a miscalculation introduced circa 533 CE by Dionysius Exes. So, to make a long story short, the Christians themselves all know, at least they should know, that the 25th of December is not the day that Jesus was born. Okay, point number 2, and we're going to speak about what day he was. At least it's up for debate also. But what about the year of his birth? So the year of his birth, that was the year. Now the date of his birth. The earliest documents that prove the year of his birth is an original church document called De Pascha Competus. Okay, and I'm not so fluent in all of these writings. Baruch Hashem, I spend my time learning Torah and teaching Torah, but I thought that it would be important for us, formal for us to know what the original sources are. Most of what I'm bringing from here is all put together by Rabbi Lawrence Kellerman, if any of you have heard of him. He's absolutely amazing. So the earliest document, which dates back to 243 CE, is a North African document that says and puts Jesus' birth at March 28th. So not December 25th. The truth is the Catholic Church was not confident with that information, with that conclusion, and therefore Clement, which was the bishop of Alexandria, who died approximately in 215 of the Common Era, he says it was wrong, and his true birthday, and this is the truth based on what they believe nowadays, is that Jesus' birthday was September 11th. What an ironic day, right? So till today, the most authentic belief of when Jesus' birthday was September 11th. Having said that, we all have to know that nobody is celebrating the birthday of Jesus on the 25th, nor the day that he was crucified, because that did not happen on December 25th. What was introduced was a day to commemorate his birth, not his birthday, and that later on in Christian and Catholic observance was put on December 25th, and we'll see why soon. Okay, so what and how did the date of December 25th come to be celebrated? So this is going back a long time ago. Let's see if I have the exact date over here. I don't. But this was a pagan custom. There was a pagan custom that they celebrated a festival that lasted from December 17th till December 25th. This many do know. It was called Saturnalia. And this was a very weird pagan custom and festival that it originated in Rome. That for 7 days, or 8 days really, the Roman courts would close down, and anyone could do whatever they want. You stole something from someone, it was yours. You broke something, you didn't need to pay it back. You killed someone, you were not held up for trial. Anything you did, it was literally chaos for 8 days. At the beginning of this festival, they would name the Lord of the Misrule, which would mean every city, every Roman city would name who the person they're going to save as the last human sacrifice on the 8th day was going to be. Horrible. And then on the 8th day, which was December 25th, is when this person was killed brutally in town square for all to see. And we can think back in those days, who were the Romans not too fond of? Well, the Jews. So many times a Jew was nominated as the Lord of the Misrule. Very sad. Okay? This was a pagan custom. Now we all know that Christianity, and I'll use a Yiddish word, is a big cholent. Why do I say that? Because what's the root of a cholent? The root of a cholent is whatever land our Jewish ancestors lived in, whatever they found available, they threw into a pot before Shabbat, they let it cook, and whatever came out the next morning was their cholent. That's literally what it is. It's a big mixture. So that's why, depending on what parts of the world your family's from, some people do put eggs in there, some people don't. Some people put potatoes, some don't. Beans, yes, no, barley, rice. There's so many things you could and could not put. That all was based on, if you're doing it based on the tradition of your family, based on where they lived and what they were able to literally throw in the cholent. Christianity is the same way. Christianity started, as we know, way after Jesus died. And it was put together, and all they wanted to do was market it and draw people to join on the bandwagon. And, well, when they would approach people, they would say, well, do you want to join this new movement? Well, they say, oh, no, we can't because we have this that we observe. No problem! Bring that in. And so when the Christian people that were, the early on Gospels were instituting Christianity, what they did was they went over to the Roman community and they invited them to join, and they said, we need to bring our Saturnalia custom with us. They said, no problem. And it was observed, unfortunately, the exact same way. 7 days of uncontrollable drinking, violence, crime, horrible things which were done during those 8 days, and that was adopted by Christianity. However, true Christians back then even did not even accept it. They knew that wasn't theirs. It was a pagan custom, but they accepted it. Okay, so later on, and we're skipping ahead because they were imported in the 4th century. That was 400, around 400 years or 300 something years after Jesus was killed. So in the 4th century is when the Saturnalia was imported into Christianity, and at that point it was more people, many more people that were part of this festival, and this festival targeted, unfortunately, lame, women, homosexuals, black people, there weren't too many of there, and the Jews. Okay? And a lot of pain and sorrow and anguish was put on to these people. They were considered the imperfects, and this was the 8 days of festival that anyone was allowed to do whatever they wanted. And it was a very, very sad time, and I'm just going through over here. In the 1600s, when the original Catholic Christians came to America, they were not accepting anyone to observe Saturnalia or December 25th, because they knew deep down that it was all a big fake. It wasn't really part of their religion, to the point where there was a period of, from 1659 till 1681, that any Christian who observed Christmas in Massachusetts, in Boston, was not was jailed because they were not really fulfilling what their belief system set out for them to fulfill and to observe. And therefore, I could go on and on about horrible things. In 1466, Pope Paul, for the amusement of his citizens, forced Jews to run naked out in the streets after feeding them a lavish meal, and unfortunately hunted many of them down. In 1881, December 25th again, Christian leaders encouraged the Polish people to set out on pogroms against the Jews. And in Warsaw, there were 12 Jews which were murdered, hundreds wounded, and dozens of women which were raped. All on the 25th. And I'm just giving you a couple of examples, and there are multiple more, but I think you get the idea. The idea is that the December 25th was definitely not a happy day for centuries for the Jewish people. That's one aspect. The second aspect is it's definitely not part of the Christian religion. So let's just go through a couple of the things that are observed in order to celebrate the day and know where they come from. So Christmas trees. Christmas trees is something which is more recent than we would think, and it was when the Christian people went over to I think it was an Asian cult. They were called the Asherah cult, and they used to worship. They used to worship these trees. That was their form of worship. By the way, we find Asherah as one of the idolatrous trees in our very own Torah. So just so we know. And when they came to them and they said, "Well, do you want to join our religion?" And our religion, many do observe the Christmas. They said, "But what about our tree?" They said, "No problem, bring your tree." So that's how the tree got introduced into the observance of Christmas, because again, they brought in another pagan cult, which this whole story started from, into their religion. And they said, what day should we observe this tree? December 25th. Why not? The way it was originally served and used as idolatry, they used to light candles and decorate it up. It's very similar to what they do nowadays. Mistletoe. Mistletoe, by the way, is a highly poisonous plant, which is a classic Christmas observance to put on top of one's doorpost. The reason for this, how it came in, was unfortunately was a Norse mythology that recounts how a certain god, Balder, was killed with the bow and arrow that has mistletoe at the tip, which poisoned him to death. Later on, this trickled its way down into observing his bravery, his death on Christmas again. I'm leaving some stuff out. Christmas presents, unfortunately, the source of it was imposed by the Roman emperors, forced the Jews at first to bring them gifts on, once a year. Later on, they pieced it together and they said, okay, let's make it December 25th. But back in the day, Roman emperors forced Jews to bring them gifts, and then they again forced not only Jews, others as well. All of that got to a confusion to have them giving gifts to one another and to children. Santa Claus, that's something that we all will be very interested in knowing the source of Santa Claus. Santa Claus we know today is under 100 years old. But listen to how he came about. Nicholas was born in Pereira, Turkey in 270 CE. Okay, that's not that long after Jesus. Later, he's called the Bishop of Myra, and he was just a regular bishop. He was doing what he did. Wasn't a great guy, but 1600 years later is when the church turned him into a saint. So he is Saint Nicholas today, 1600 years after he even passed. Okay? They sainted him and they gave him the day, December 6th, as his day of commemoration. Because, again, just wanting to make everything a cholent, they took his day, and they said, okay, maybe the 26th is the day that he was given. Let's just throw it into December 25th. Now, St. Nicholas was not a good person because he was actually one of the editors to the New Testament, and he was one of the people who signed off on it and even added many of the things which were used as a manual and a handbook to the future oppressors of the Jews to come, whether it's Hitler or the Spanish Jews, the Spaniards who oppressed the Jews during the Inquisition. They all referred back to the New Testament saying that the Jews were the ones who killed our God. And that was all thanks, big part of, to Mr. Nicholas, or Saint Nicholas. This image of this very scary individual made a lot of sense. I'm sure we've all seen these caricatures of what Santa Claus really looked like 100 years ago. It was literally this tall, scary individual with a black beard and a black, long fur coat because he lived in Turkey. It was a representation of Saint Nicholas. This then became something which was very scary to children and to people, and they were trying to figure out, why is there an association between St. Nicholas, December 25th? It's 19 days prior. What are we going to do? So finally, and I'm wrapping it up, finally a genius marketing scheme by none other than Coca-Cola. We know that, right? Yes. In 1930s, Coca-Cola took your caricature of Santa Claus. By the way, Claus, that's a very scary word, right? Santa Claus, okay? But either way, there's a whole story behind that also. They took this caricature of Santa Claus, this Turkish scary bishop, and they sent it out to many artists. I forget the artist's name. They sent out to many artists, and I want you, and the Coca-Cola Association comes to their artists and says, I need to market this in a nice way. The only thing we need is for this Santa Claus to have a red coat and Coca-Cola red coat. So ever since the 1930s, Santa Claus turned into this rosy-cheeked, white-bearded individual, which is literally all a marketing scheme. It's a scheme to get all people, Jews and non-Jews alike, out into stores to buying gifts, buying things you don't need, buying gifts for people who don't really need the gifts, and having a couple days off of work, and all of this to tell us that the evolving of the current day Christmas that we have is literally one big cholent. It's a big mix-up of different pagan customs and non-pagan customs. To end off, I would like you to imagine, before you want to observe or to celebrate such a holiday, I want you to imagine if in 100 years from now, your great-grandchildren are celebrating a day. And it's a random day of the year. Pick any day. Let's go June 1st, for argument's sake. And June 1st would be named as Hitler Day. God forbid. Or Nazi Commemoration Day. June 1st. Horrible, right? And you would see all these weird customs and celebrations and observances being fulfilled by all world, right? Some genius is going to come up with a marketing scheme to get everyone to start buying gifts on June 1st also, okay? And do similar type of observances as we have for Christmas, all commemorating a horrible individual who did horrible things and convinced thousands of horrible people to do the most atrocious things that recent Jewish history has ever seen. But your kids and your grandkids and your great-grandchildren don't know about it, but they're observing it. That is, unfortunately, exactly what Christmas is. Christmas was a day, decade, century to century, millennium to millennium, which was used as a day to persecute, to take advantage of others, but specifically the Jews. So any Jew who feels like they are entitled to celebrating the most mixed up holiday the world has ever seen, maybe we need to rethink it and come to the conclusion that it's really a mixed up holiday with bits and pieces of oppressions and hardships which were administered to our ancestors. And can you imagine meeting your ancestor from 1,000 years ago? And here you are tonight, sitting around a tree, exchanging gifts all wrapped in green and red. And, I don't know, having your stockings up on, I don't know, all their traditions. And doing all these things. And that person looking at you and saying, are you serious? Do you know how much Jewish blood was spilled on this day? For no good reason, just because we were Jews? And you're celebrating it? Now, it's funny that it always coincides with Chanuka, because unfortunately, even in our own religion and our own observances and celebrations, there are, Gentile customs which sometimes trickle down into the modern way that people do observe certain of our customs. Now, gifts on Chanuka was never a real thing. Okay? Where does Chanuka geld come from? So, Chanuka geld nowadays just comes from, wanting to give a gift to your children, to your grandchildren. It's a nice thing. I'm not even saying we should stop it. However, the originality of Chanuka gelds and dreidels was little kids faking to gamble with each other when they were sitting down and learning Torah. They would be learning Torah, and then quickly when Greeks would come by, they'd close their books, they'd pull out coins, and they'd start playing dreidel. That's where Chanuka geld comes from. Okay, our other observances of donuts and latkes, well, yeah, since the miracle was about oil, so we put oil in everything. So we dunk ourselves in oil for 8 days. But giving gifts on Chanuka is not something which is rooted in the original observance. It's not, obviously, it's not a mitzvah. Could it be used as an opportunity to give your children something or give your grandchildren something? Could be. I'm not saying yes. I'm not saying it shouldn't be. Some do, some don't. It depends how we grew up. I'm not saying you need to barge into your house and say, no Hanukkah gifts. Maybe keep them, but make sure you know why you're doing it. Make sure you're giving it as a gift because it's Hanukkah, not because it's the season of giving. Because the season of giving, the way we know it, really originated from the season of literally giving the end to someone's life. And those people were unfortunately our ancestors. So just to wrap up tonight's class, we first spoke about Joseph and the dreams that we had. Then we spoke about the connection between Chanuka and this week's Torah portion, and Joseph specifically. And then we spoke about a great misconception of the observance of the holiday season, that again, I'm not coming and saying, yes allowed, not allowed. I'm saying, make the decision for yourself. Use the analogy of, in 100 years from now, if God forbid, there'd be a Hitler Day, Hitler Commemoration Day, a Nazi Day. If you would like to see, or how you would react to see your great-grandchildren or your great-great-grandchildren indulging and getting drunk on such a holiday, and getting out and getting all together and being happy on that day. I'll end off with one last thing. There were archaeologists who were looking for the 7 cows that Paro thought of in Egypt, to see if it really took place or not, to see if the Torah is for real or not. They're looking and they're looking and they're looking, and guess what they found? Absolutely nothing, because it was only a dream. Happy Hanukkah.